Good morning and welcome to the Resilience Movement podcast. I'm really excited to have my guest here today, Duncan Burns. Hi, Duncan. How are you?
Yeah, good, Donna. Good to be here.
So I'm really excited to be able to talk about men's business and what you're doing up there in Queensland. Where are you specifically located in Queensland?
Personally, I'm sort of in between Gold Coast and Brisbane.
Right. Okay. And I've been following you and we've been kind of chatting for a little while now, and I love some of the work that you're doing and your story. So I really wanted to have you on as a guest so that you could share some of that with our listeners. And I know we have lots of men listening to this podcast now, so I'm excited to get started. So can you tell me a bit about, and our listeners, a bit about your journey? And specifically, like, what was life like maybe 10 years ago compared to what life is like now?
Yeah, completely different. I grew up as an only child. I did have a younger sister that died a cot death. That's sort of where my childhood trauma comes from. Went through school, high school, basically feeling like I didn't fit in anywhere. Then couldn't get out of high school quick enough to get into work. Found a job, or managed to get a job in a pub, and then got sort of introduced to gangs. I grew up in Sydney, and then that's pretty much. I mean, I was already on drugs due to teenage depression. Just basically pot at that stage. But it was, to using it to numb out and suppress and basically sort of feel anything other than being in that dark hole. That was basically where I was at that stage. Then I was like, 19, 20 when I started working in the pub.
Yeah.
Then through gang, got introduced to speed. I was hanging around gang for a couple of years before I nommed up. And then, I was patched up at 23.
And for those of you who don't know what that means, I don't know what that means. So okay. What does that mean?
A nominee is a prospective member, or they call them prospects or nominees. So right. Generally each gang has a different time period. Some will go, anything up to about 12 months. Some will be a bit longer. And basically just pretty, to an extent, you do what you're asked. It's just a matter of doing stuff at the clubhouse and all that sort of just various chores, I suppose, jobs, getting things done. Then we go through, if you get through that period, then basically you get your patch, which is, what you used to wear on the back of your vest. I mean, you don't see that anymore due to, laws and all that sort of stuff. But so I was patched up at 23 and then went through that for 6 years and got shot dead at 29 in a gang war. Got out
and
of
you
that.
Talk about that you talk about that. I got shot, and, and a lot of people go like, what? You got shot? So was this gang like your family?
That's the reason I got into it in the beginning. I was, it's preached that it's a family and all that sort of stuff. But when you get in there, I realised when I got in there that it was nothing like that. It had already begun to change. Back in the days when the gangs kicked off, after Vietnam and all that sort of stuff, that it was pretty much, sort of family orientated. But drugs and money and that had taken over by the stage I got my patch. And we were at war, and that was over drugs and that as well. And so I got, I've worked out, it was either wrong place at the wrong time that day, or there could even be the possibility of being set up to get shot. A bit of a story behind that. I'll probably a bit too lengthy to go into here. But the bullet went in my back and out my chest. I ended up managing to stay on the bike and ride my bike another kilometre up the road to where my vice president's house was, and died in the gutter. Luckily that the paramedics brought me back. So yeah, and then stupidly checked myself out after 4 days in hospital and running around like an idiot, as you
Thinking
do.
you're bulletproof and, like,
Yeah, as you do. Just in that whole state of shock and yeah, just everything else that was going on as well around that
mm,
time.
and that lifestyle, does it become a bit like it's the norm, right, for a very long time?
Hmm.
Was there a point where you went, I just don't want to be in this life anymore?
Well, it's funny because I heard that podcast that you did with the lady previously whose partner came out of jail and all that and committed suicide.
Mm,
Um, and that sort of really, resonated with me, a lot of the things. But I feel a lot of people don't understand really what goes on. I mean, I had a few situations come up prior to that, but due to the fact of me being stubborn and wanting to, be the way it was supposed to be, I just kept pushing. Stubbornness kept pushing forward. I didn't get out, and plus, you've invested, or you don't really want to see. I didn't really want to see what it really was for what it really was.
mm,
How treacherous it was. I didn't really want to believe that I just spent, nearly the best part of 10 years in something and it all pure bullshit, really. Luckily, I didn't spend any time in jail, but I saw a lot of guys go away and then come back. And just before or just after I left, there was a couple of guys that got done for some pretty decent stuff and sent away for 20, 25 years.
wow.
Yeah, knowing what I know, yeah, it is a lifestyle, but it's also hard to get out of and hard to change once you're in. I mean, for me personally, and I'm dare say for a lot of other guys that go in with mental health issues, like as I said, I was already in and out of deep depression. So then you start taking, the amphetamines and all that, which kick off your dopamine levels. So you start feeling good and great, and it's like nothing's wrong. But then, comes its whole thing is an addiction.
Mm.
Um,
And it's really interesting that you talk about that because, I can see, especially from watching my son's experience, that he calls jail the revolving door, because it's so hard to break the cycle. And, the way you're talking now is you've had that awakening of there is a different life, there is a different way to do life. And it doesn't have to be about, drugs and gangs and violence. There is a different way. And so fast forward now to not so much today, but when your journey really began to where life was going to take a dramatic turn for the better.
well, I got out of the gang shortly after I got shot, and started driving trucks. Wasn't going anywhere, so then I just packed up my family and moved up to Queensland. The aim of getting a job in the mines, thinking that was going to be the be all and end all, Um, it worked out for a few years, but I still kept walking to a degree. I still had contacts in clubs and all that sort of stuff, and wasn't really. I had distanced myself from the drug scene and all that, but I still had contacts in there. So, but then when my relationship with my first partner, my daughter's mother, started to really deteriorate, I went back to what I knew best,
Mm,
just numbing out and suppressing. I mean, I still hadn't really delved into what was creating those issues in the first place, and I feel that's a big issue, especially for guys coming out of jail, like and coming out of gang life. Like, you've been living that, I guess, to a degree, living a lie for so long. It's pretty hard to face the brutal truth. When you come off drugs, you drop back, or I drop back into a deeper, darker hole than what I was when I first got in there.
mm,
So you're not only dealing with that, you're dealing with, the mindset of it all. I was also dealing with, you know, having flashbacks, having dreams of, you know, being, you know, watching me heat up the glass bowl or the ice pipe, because I got back into drugs and involved in an ice syndicate years after, and then ended up losing everything. So the catalyst for massive change for me was, yeah, once again, losing everything. And,
I think they
you
could
know,
call that rock bottom.
facing death again. Yeah. Well, I triggered a dead man switch to get out of the situation I was in. So I was looking at, you know, death again. And yeah, it's just pretty much a lot of the time waking up every morning after having, you know, dreams of being chased and shot, and or being at a party and walking into a room with a table covered in ice, you know what I mean? Or, you know, and these are all dreams. So when you wake up, that's the first thing that's on your mind, is that whole thing. So then you kick off your day that way. So getting out of that, you know, that dark hole can be a mission in itself.
And isn't it interesting because, you know, I've never been on drugs, so I don't know what that's like, what you're describing, but I do know after many years of teaching and learning and being on a journey myself, that whatever you go to bed thinking about, you wake up thinking about. So if you're going to bed with negative thoughts, you're going to wake up with negative thoughts, because that's what your unconscious mind is, you know, creating. So if you're going to bed and you're dreaming about that all night, yeah, you're absolutely going to wake up with that at the forefront of your thinking, you know, the first thing when you open your eyes. So that must be really hard.
Yeah, well, plus, you know, getting off ice and the addiction, how addictive it is. But my belief is that the reason that it's so addictive is that generally when people try it, they're at such a low level and they've been at a low level for a while, that the next thing is they're up here on that high. So getting away from that, because then when you get off it, you drop down, and you, as I said, you drop down into a deeper, darker hole. So it's just like they have to, not having the tools to understand and cope with and to get through it. You know, what's the easiest way to do it is to get back on and try and get that rush again, you know, to make you feel alive, or feel anything really.
Yeah, because that's what you know. So,
Yeah.
so what would you say is different in your life today?
Oh, everything, everything. Yeah, I mean,
Break it down in the sense that, you know, someone could be listening to this podcast who is in a place of, you know, they could be using, they could be in a deep depression, they could be going like, where do I start? Where do I start to, you know, I want to change. I don't want to live, you know, this Groundhog Day anymore. What do I do? How did you get started?
basically, yeah, losing everything and having to live in my car for 3 to 4 months after I got off ice. And, you know, without knowing it, I was inadvertently intermittent fasting and cold water therapy. Like I was showering in parks at the end of winter. So that was my cold water therapy, and then intermittent fasting because I was living on Centrelink payments. But also reading a lot of self-help books, and every time I had a craving, I'd go out and train, go for a walk, go for a run, go for a ride. It's just a matter of restructuring your whole world, really. I purposely lost my phone, lost all the contacts, so I didn't have that ability or that thing that was in my hand 24/7, knowing that all I had to do was ring somebody and I could go and get back on.
Yeah.
And
So really shutting out those parts of your life that you go like, I don't want to do this anymore.
yeah.
And so, you know, and that really comes down to you, doesn't it? You had to take 100% responsibility.
Yeah, and that can be extremely hard. I've spent many a day on the floor, found myself standing on a chair with a rope around my neck a couple of times. Yeah, as I said, spent many a day on the floor in tears and all that sort of stuff, really realizing where I'd been and what I'd created. And that's a part of where I'm at now, is also sitting in circle, which I've been doing, men's circles, which I've been doing for a good couple of years now. And that's all a part of really owning my shit, or, you know, owning your shit and accepting my responsibility in the situations that I created, and also understanding what's driving that negative behavior and those negative patterns and beliefs, and becoming aware of when they start to kick in, and learning, getting coping tools and all those sorts of things to help better understand and move through those situations.
And what would the old you have thought about a men's circle?
Oh, I didn't even know about anything like that. I mean, even after I got shot, I can't remember ever being suggested to go to counselling or see a psych. Whereas these days, a lot of the time it's becoming a lot more mainstream. The only problem is a lot of men don't feel that that's what they need. They brush it off, which is what I did myself. I'll be right, just head down, keep, push forward. But in the end, it just comes out one way or the other. And generally it comes out in a negative way, and a negative way with the people that are closest around, me or you.
So what is a men's circle?
Just the way they used to do it in Indigenous times and back in the old times, is they used to come together, sit in circle and talk about what everybody's issues are, what's going on. But these days there's a lot more psychology background to it, and understanding what your shadow is and what's driving your behavior, and being accountable, being in integrity.
Owning your stuff.
Yeah, it's that, and seeing how you make an agreement, and as men we make agreements, but that we don't show up. So you're out of accountability with other people, or you're out of integrity with yourself, and what's driving that behaviour. Generally, it comes back to not feeling like you're enough, or I'm not feeling I'm enough, or I'm not worthy of something, or I'm good enough, or I'm not loved, or I'm not lovable, which can be some big things. And just also understanding how your wounded child plays a pattern in how you show up in relationships and partnerships and all that sort of stuff.
And I mean, I grew up with two brothers and a father that was very sport orientated, and so I know how boys kind of are raised. I've seen how boys were raised, and we had a street full of boys, and and there was a lot of that, boys don't cry, boys don't talk about their feelings, and and that's continued on. And I know my own son, I've always talked about my feelings, probably to where it drove people a bit nuts, because I'm very forward, and I don't have a problem saying how I feel. But I know for my son, he numbs because he doesn't want to feel it. He, as soon as he starts to feel it, it's time to numb in whatever way, whether it's drinking, gambling, drugs, I don't think it really mattered for him. So, I think that it's a beautiful thing to have. Women have done this for a long time. Would you agree? Like, naturally?
Yeah. From what I know, women's circles and these sorts of self-development programs and all that sort of stuff have been, women have been more interactive in them for a lot longer. And, it's been exactly as you said, it's a generational issue, especially with men, that has been, handed down, that, it's just suck it up, move forward, you'll be right. But as it's been shown, with domestic violence, gangs, drugs, all those sorts of things, just negative behaviours, that it's not the way forward. You can't keep suppressing emotions and whatever else is going on within you without it coming to a point where one day it's going to explode, or it's going to come out in patterns, whether it be porn or gambling or drugs or alcohol, exactly like you said.
Yeah. Wow. And so what do you see as some of the challenges that young boys and young men are facing today?
Breaking that generational conditioning. That's, and feeling safe enough to be able to be held in a circle of men that understand the situation and really dig deep on their issues, and being okay with that, being okay with what comes up, being okay with understanding that, yeah, okay, you feel angry or you feel sad or whatever it is that you're feeling, but there's ways and means of dealing with those in a healthy way rather than projecting them onto somebody else or suppressing them and then exploding one day and taking it out on the kids or taking it out on the partner or taking it out at people at work or whatever, however that may play out. So it's getting to a place where they feel comfortable enough to talk about what is actually going on. I mean, that's the way they used to do it in Indigenous cultures years ago, is, take the young boys away once they get to a certain age level and take them up a mountain. So they start creating connections with older men, and understanding, how to be as a man. I mean, obviously things have evolved in society these days to what it was back in Indigenous times, but there's still things that they used and ways that they dealt with situations back then that are implemented today to help men move through what is a very complex society and community these days.
Yeah, and I guess when you talk about vulnerability, what do people think about being vulnerable, and then there's the masculinity as well, and men being able to have that masculinity, but masculinity doesn't equal being what I might call a thug or aggressive. Being masculine is actually a very important, attractive trait in a man.
Yeah, well, I mean, the word toxic is being thrown around a lot, and I hate that term, especially knowing what I know now is that both men and women have feminine and masculine energies within them. And if you're going to, for me personally, my opinion is, if you're going to label masculinity toxic, then you're also labeling something within yourself that's toxic. So my preference is to say it's healthy or unhealthy habits or behaviors. So there's unhealthy ways of being, men, and that's like has previously said. There's like being, aggressive or being, abusive, however that shows up in relationships. And then more often than not, as I'm sure you'll know in women's circles, that women prefer men to be able to speak their truth and be able to speak their emotions. For me, I just never knew how to do it. My communication was definitely not a big thing in my family. And that's where I got to, and that's how I created all of my issues, with just shutting down. Didn't know how to communicate where I was at. Didn't know how to communicate what I was going through. So yeah, it's about learning the tools and to be able to do that and show up in a vulnerable way. As I said, like there's been many, many times and especially after I split with my son's mum, probably nearly 18 months ago, and even when I split with after I split with my daughter's mum, there's many, many times I've, after dropping the kids off, came home and was on the floor for another hour after that, trying to pick myself up. And more often than not, most men out there understand that. They've been through similar situations. I mean, sitting in circle, I've come to realize how many men actually out there have been sexually abused or molested as young as kids. Yeah. Like the rates that is reported is that women, are so many times more susceptible to being sexually abused. But I mean, that's only due to the fact that it's known cases that people have come forward. And the amount of times I've seen men sit in circle and come out, finally get to the point where they feel comfortable coming out and speaking what happened to them. And it's like, right, okay, now we're starting to understand why the patterns you've played out in your life have come about.
And have that awakening of, oh, is that why I do what I do? Or is that why I feel so angry? Or is that why I feel shame? And, I don't know if you've seen any of Brene Brown's work, She's a researcher, and she talks about the fact, and I've tested this in many of my classes where we talk about we learn about emotional intelligence, and I ask someone to name as many emotions as you can as quickly as you can, and people are lucky to get to 5. And in fact, she talks about the fact that their research is defining that, we should be able to articulate between 30 and 40 emotions, but our emotional vocabulary is not developed enough because we don't take the time to go, what am I feeling right now? All right, I'm angry. It's okay to be angry. What am I angry about? And simply going a bit deeper in yourself and asking those questions. And we haven't learnt to do that. And, it holds us back from being able to communicate.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's not educated. All the stuff we're taught in school is nothing about how to relate to each other. And if you're in class and you're not coping with it, and you're not understanding, so you get angry and you act it out. Generally, they're sent to the principal's office or sent to the back of the room, or so then there's shame and guilt attached to that and how they've reacted.
Yeah.
And they don't understand how to communicate that. I mean, that's one of the core things I think should be taught in schools, is how to understand what's going on and be able to learn to communicate and understand what it is that the child's going through. I mean, creating shame and guilt and judgment around how they are, and also about how we are as ourselves, doesn't solve the problem. It just compounds the problem.
Yeah, definitely. So now for the men listening to this podcast who want to become more in touch with themselves, where can they start? And, they might not know about circles, nor they might not be ready to go to that stage yet. But if they do, of course, they could reach out to you in Queensland and find out about the men's circles there. But where would they start if they went, like, I've had negative relationships. I don't want to do these negative relationships anymore. How do I become better? Because people have to understand that the only person you can change is you. The only person that can evolve is you. You can't make someone else evolve, nor can you teach them anything. But to look inside, you can start to see where you're maybe going wrong yourself. And so where would they start?
Well, I mean, I actually started going to see a psychologist, a few years ago when I was with my son's mum. Once again, patterns playing out, depression kicking in, so just I bit the bullet. Just went, right, something's got to change. So I got up and just went through the process, and the projected shame I had around showing up to a psychologist was nowhere near actually the way it was. And I walked out of, after doing however many sessions with the psych, having a better understanding and being able to relate with my parents and the relationship that we had. And also understanding sort of, as I said, what my issues were growing up, and having a great understanding of that, which has evolved into sitting in circle. I mean, that's one of the big things I think these days is it is becoming more, I guess, more prevalent, or there are a lot more men out there doing work like that, or sitting in circle, but it still needs to be, promoted a lot more than what it is. I mean, they talk about, domestic violence, going up, drug addictions going up, and all that sort of stuff. The only programs I've ever heard of before sitting in circle was reactive programs. Well, by that stage, you've already created more damage than, what it was before. So how about we start promoting, proactive programs, like getting out there, talking to men and telling them and showing them what is available out there, rather than, hitting them across the hand with the wooden stick saying, oh no, we didn't support you up until this point. You didn't know what was out there. We didn't create a level of awareness or safety for you to show up to deal with your stuff, so it didn't get to this point.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I remember some years ago, I know of someone who thought that there was so much shame in going to a psychologist, and that stemmed from the way they were raised. And, you know, boys don't cry and boys don't talk about feelings. And then as you become a man, you have taken that with you. And he would rather, at the time, he rather stayed the way he was, because going and getting help was just not an option, you know. And I had to talk to him about that and go, there's nothing wrong with talking to someone. There is no shame in saying, hey, I'm not okay.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot more promotion around, you know, Are You OK Day and men's mental health, but there needs to be a lot more done. Yeah, as you said, it's generational conditioning, and that's been handed down, you know, for years and years and years to be that way. So it's going to take a lot more to break those cycles. And I'm sure you understand that it's getting out of your comfort zone too. You know, when you start doing the work, the work on yourself or myself, it's leaning into those uncomfortable situations, showing up the best way that you can show, and being okay with that too. Like allowing yourself, giving yourself a bit of leeway, you know, and a bit of love, just going, okay, this is where I'm at. And it's okay. This is the beginning of the process to changing what needs to change to show up better for myself, better for my family, better for my kids, you know, better for, you know, relationships, community, and society. So until, you know, we break that, you know, really, really break that stigma, yeah, that's where I think a lot of the work needs to be done.
Yeah. And so you have a son, and what are you teaching him? He's like, is he 4?
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
4 years old.
That was a good guess.
Yeah, sorry?
That was a good guess.
Yeah. Well, I've got 2 girls as well, 11 and 14, and a son that's 4. Something that really stuck with me was a facilitator in Circle said one time, are you the type of man that you would be proud to see your daughters fall in love with? And are you the type of man that you would be proud to see your son grow into? And if your answers are no to that, then what example are you setting for your kids, like especially for your daughters? Are you showing up the type of man that you would see them want to become, want to, you know, fall in love with, or get into a relationship and be married to, have kids to? You know, you're the one setting the example. I'm the one setting the example for that. You know, I'm the one setting the example for my son. And believe me, I don't have it all down pat. You know, as you well know, Donna, when you start the work, you realise how much more work there is to do.
It doesn't end.
But it's got to start somewhere, you know. And yeah, when I heard that, that was like the proverbial baseball bat to the back of the head. Just like, fuck.
I can totally resonate with what you're saying, because a few years ago, I had, you know, when I was doing some work and I was working with a spiritual coach, and I went and I had so much shame and guilt that I worked on. Like, once this came up for me, I went, oh my God, I was the mother showing my daughters what they should tolerate. And I was showing my son the behavior that was okay to do towards a woman. And I was in a very negative relationship for a long time, more than, you know, 10 years. So when I got that, you know, and I still say this to my son today, you are your daughter's role model. You've got to understand that. And do you want her to be dating you? Do you want her to bring home you? Because that's what you're showing her. And he doesn't get it yet, but I know I've planted the seed. So when you said that, it just, you know, I just go, yep, that was the baseball bat that went ouch, big time.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly as you said. I mean, the best thing you can do is be there to support, offer support, and also plant the seed. You know, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But the more times you show up, and also if I'm doing my work, I mean, I've had men in Circle come to me after, you know, 12, 18 months, just go, holy fuck, you are so completely different to the person who showed up. I mean, the first few times I showed up in Circle, I couldn't even get a sentence without breaking down, like just turning into a blubbering mess.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, now I'm at the point where I'm, learning to facilitate. I'm looking at setting up setting up another men's circle in the Logan area up here in Queensland. Through the program I'm doing at work, I'm pushing forward to getting men's circles into jails to help them.
That would be such massive work, getting them into jails.
I'm not only obviously helping them with their trauma as to why they're there and what's going on in their lives, but also helping them get into the right space to transition out of jail, like coming back out. Like, as I'm sure if you spoke to a lot of men, that when they go in at one level, and when they come out, and if they've been in there for quite a few years, when they come out, everything's completely different. Plus, they're also dealing with all the mental health issues of why they're in there, what's going on, plus what's going on in jail as well.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at now, and also getting. My original mission was to get farm programs into youth detention, to get young men out on the farms rather than caging them up. I mean, you cage an animal, how do you expect it to act? I mean, it's only going to act like a caged animal. You're throwing kids in jail. In my opinion, you're throwing young people in jail that are already traumatized, and all you're doing is adding trauma on top of that trauma. And similar to men going into jail. I mean, don't get me wrong. There is you have to accept the consequences of your actions, and there is a punishment that needs to be handed out. But how they're dealing with those men inside those systems is not doing anything. All it's doing is creating that revolving door, as you said, and all they're doing with the young men in youth detention is just getting them ready to be the next generation to go into adult jails, in my opinion.
Well, I saw that firsthand when I worked at the youth detention centre near where I live, and these young people who are already traumatised, I actually couldn't believe that they had to attend high school. That was mandatory to attend schoolwork each day, but it wasn't mandatory for them to get counselling for their trauma. Now, to me, that is the most back to front thing. And, they want to say because it's a human rights detention centre, what does that have to do? You have young people who are traumatized, and you were right. Many of them spoke about the fact that they can't wait to go where dad and big brother are, which are in the jail. And that was shocking to me that we're not helping these young people who have been traumatized heal. And it's so back to front. And I would think that by now we should understand a lot more, all the research, all the years, and we're still not doing it any different. What do they say about the sign of insanity?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, but in saying that too, there's a lot of money behind all that. From my understanding, they spend anywhere from up to 150 million on the new development going on in the youth detention centre. So 150 million is a lot of money. So there's other reasons behind it, but in my opinion, is if you want to create a different society than the one that we have now, is that we have to, not only do we work with the men that I feel that are at their extreme end, but we also need to start working with the young men on the issues they've got going on, instead of creating more trauma on top of their trauma that they've already got. Otherwise, we're just going to keep, exactly as you said, we're just going to keep playing out things the way that they've been playing out for generations now.
Yeah. So is there anything you would like to tell our listeners? I mean, you've told us so much, and I'm so grateful for you being on here. So, but is there anything you want to leave the listeners with?
I mean, there's men that I know that have showed up in circle and haven't spoke or done anything for anything up to 12 months, but they've still showed up. They're still showing up for themselves and for their families and that. And there will come a time that they feel safe enough to open up. Also, like my story, your story might, be somebody else's medicine. Your story might be, sitting in circle, telling whatever it is going on for you at the moment might be somebody else's permission slip to turn around and go, hey, shit, that's somebody else that's gone through exactly the same. I'm not the only one. You know what I mean? So it's not about also, you know, working through your own internal stuff, but if the more we speak about what's going on for ourselves, it can create a connection between people and give other people that strength or inspiration to really open up and show up who they really are.
Beautifully said. And I love the analogy of the permission slip, giving someone the permission slip to speak because you know someone else has been there. So thank you so very much for your time. Thank you everyone for tuning in again. I'm sure we'll have Duncan on again.
Yeah.
And
I also have a Facebook page. It's Brothers Keeper. It's all one word. So yeah, if anybody wants to reach out, or they can jump on that or reach out.
And I'll put that in the description on the podcast, the Brothers Keeper Facebook page. And please, you know, for those men listening who want to reach out, you could simply send a message, and that's a step in getting started on a different, you know, a different journey, I guess. So thank you so much.
It's Brothers Keeper, not the Brothers Keeper or my Brothers Keeper. It's just Brothers Keeper.
Brothers Keeper. Okay, I'll put a link below so we'll have that.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
All right, thanks very much, Donna.
Bye, everyone.